To understand the betrayal, you have to know the love. 12 years before that terrible day, I met Ethan at a charity auction. He was a rising executive, magnetic, kind, and instantly drawn to the girl hiding in the back. Our romance felt pure, almost transparent. He was an executive known for his integrity, and at home he was my thoughtful, meticulous husband. I felt an undeniable love and, crucially, a safety I'd never known. We built a beautiful home and a seemingly unbreakable life. He gave me the fairy tale, the stability, the life I craved. But that perfect life, that foundation of trust, was about to be obliterated by the secrets he took to his grave. The shock of Lauren's claim was only the first tremor. It made me look back at every sweet gesture, every loving glance, and ask, what kind of secret could completely unravel a decade of pure devotion? I am Victoria Adams, 31, a data entry clerk in Milwaukee. My world shattered when my sister Lauren smirked and said, "Liam isn't just your child. He's my husband's son." Then she produced a bogus will, demanding half of my $800,000 house. My grief for my dead husband turned instantly into pure cold warfare. The betrayal was unbearable, a devastating blow that revealed my husband's secret and my sister's greed. My world cracked. The love I'd trusted became a secret weapon against me. The betrayal was unbearable. Everything was a lie. How could Ethan? How could my sister? I felt violently sick. That moment was the death of my innocence, replaced by a searing, toxic realization. As Ethan's wife, I'd built a life on loyalty and faith. Now, I was left widowed, blindsided, and utterly alone. The house, once a fortress of our love, suddenly felt like a mausoleum filled with his secrets. I wasn't just grieving a husband, I was forced to defend his honor while fighting his sins. I was trapped in the crossfire of his mistakes that involved my own sister and the paternity of my son, Liam. This was a battle I never asked for, but one I had to win. I was the loving wife who discovered she'd been living a carefully constructed lie, mourning a man who was simultaneously my protector and my betrayer. Lauren and my father, David, saw me as the weakest link, the obstacle standing between them and Ethan's considerable assets. They underestimated the power of a mother betrayed. My grief was turning into pure, cold resolve. The question wasn't if I would fight, but how ruthless I could afford to be to protect my son's future. This financial deception was only the beginning. The shock of Lauren's claim had barely faded when the financial secrets started surfacing. I was drowning in Ethan's paperwork when I found a file for a discreet family trust I never knew existed. Why a secret trust? The unease deepened. Then I found another document, a massive life insurance policy taken out in my name, well after our wedding. It wasn't for Liam, it was strictly for me. Ethan was generous, yes, but this level of secrecy felt less like planning and more like preparation for an escape. The financial structure of my perfect life was collapsing under the weight of his hidden deals. I felt a mounting anxiety, realizing my loving husband had orchestrated a complex financial cover-up. What was Ethan truly trying to protect me from? The question was heavier than the grief. Each new discovery didn't just add a secret, it took a piece of my memory. Was Ethan the faithful, loving husband I'd mourned? Or was he a man with divided loyalties, carefully constructing two lives, one with me, and one hidden? The uncertainty was a corrosive poison, and while I wrestled with this doubt, the whispers started. Lauren and her allies didn't stop at demanding money. They started attacking my identity. I overheard relatives whisper I'd gotten lucky marrying a man of Ethan's status, implying my devotion, my years of support, and my resilience were meaningless. My strength was completely dismissed. They were painting me as the gold digger who lost her sugar daddy. This criticism was an additional layer of pain, fueling my self-doubt while I struggled with genuine grief. But their cruelty didn't crush me, it sharpened my focus. If they wanted to play a financial game and attack my character, I would find the full, unvarnished truth hidden in Ethan's files. The battle was no longer just about the house, it was about reclaiming my dignity. How deep did Ethan's loyalty truly go? And how far would I have to dig to find proof of my own worth? Grief is exhausting, but betrayal is a second full-time job. I managed bills, legal paperwork, and the crushing weight of deceit alone. As a data entry clerk, I already worked long hours. Now I was working twice as hard just to keep our ship afloat. I had to audit every account, trace every expenditure, and learn the dense language of wills and trusts. I was holding the pieces of Ethan's world together while mine completely collapsed. Every late night, every financial statement felt like a desperate act of preservation. I wasn't fighting for luxury, I was fighting for the stability Liam deserved. My determination was forged in that solitude. I knew I couldn't mourn until I secured our future. But the weight of doing it all alone was heavy. The constant effort, coupled with the family's relentless whispers about my supposed luck, made the path incredibly isolating. How much longer could one woman hold a collapsing world on her shoulders before she broke? The physical exhaustion from the paperwork was nothing compared to the emotional degradation. Even my strength was ignored. I overheard a relative on the phone with Lauren completely dismissing my role. They whispered I'd gotten lucky marrying Ethan, that without his status, I was nothing more than a glorified data entry clerk. They ignored the 12 years of emotional support, the devotion, and the quiet resilience it took to be his wife. They were trying to define me by my husband's status, stripping me of my hard-won dignity. Their goal was clear: paint me as the undeserving obstacle so they could justify their greed. That realization was a cold slap of clarity. Their casual cruelty was the final wake-up call. I stopped mourning the man who betrayed me and started honoring the woman who survived him. I knew the full truth was my only shield against their toxic narrative. Their contempt didn't just hurt, it armed me with a fierce, focused resentment. But what specific evidence could I use to dismantle their lies completely? And when would be the perfect moment to deploy it? The day of the notarization felt like a court hearing, not a probate meeting. I was ready for paperwork, but not for the ambush. Just as the notary sat down, the door swung open. Lauren walked in, followed by my father, David. David stayed silent, but Lauren's accusations cut deep. She painted me as the selfish, neglectful wife who made Ethan feel inadequate, forcing him into secrecy. Lies piled higher than the probate files. My rage was a physical tremor under the table. Ethan was the one with the hidden child and the secret trust, yet I was the one they publicly declared undeserving of his memory or his assets. Lauren's words were calculated to break my spirit, to make me doubt my own grief and worth. Their goal was psychological warfare, break my spirit before I could prove their fraud. But I had my own evidence, months in the making. The injustice was fuel. They wanted a fight, and I was about to give them one. What kind of devastating truth was Victoria prepared to reveal to shut down their lies forever? After the initial character assassination, Lauren moved to the main event, the money. She wasn't just demanding half the house based on her custodial right to Liam's inheritance, she had a list of alleged debts. Lauren claimed she'd loaned Ethan a significant sum to cover the unexpected costs of our wedding, a wedding I thought we paid for. She demanded immediate repayment of that loan plus interest. She even tried to claim the money she gave Ethan was for Liam's care. I looked at my father, David, hoping for a flicker of shame or defense. He met my gaze with a flat, empty look. He was entirely complicit. It wasn't about Liam's welfare or Ethan's honor. It was strictly an inheritance grab. In that horrifying moment, I achieved complete clarity. They wanted the healing to stop, the grief to fade, and the money to flow directly into their pockets. They weren't fighting for justice, they were fighting for greed. I realized that my true purpose in that room was not to mourn, but to dismantle them. The emotional wound suddenly felt secondary to the strategic necessity of protecting my son. The battle for the house was just getting started, but they had no idea I was holding the real weapon. How did my plan to expose their greed and Ethan's deception simultaneously? And what powerful evidence would silence them both? Lauren's greed was the opening I needed. I let them rant, letting their confidence swell into arrogance. While they focused on their fraudulent claims, I quietly prepared my own defense, gathering the scattered puzzle pieces of Ethan's life. The first piece was the valid, notarized will I'd found hidden behind a loose floorboard. It was recent, legal, and clearly stated I was the sole inheritor of all joint assets, including the $800,000 house. Then came the deeds, the financial statements, and the evidence proof of Ethan's deliberate and legal intent to protect me from his mistakes. I wasn't relying on their mercy, I was relying on Ethan's final, binding intentions to defend my rights. This was my silent, strategic move. That will shut down their financial claim, but it wouldn't silence their vicious rumors. For that, I needed Ethan's voice, not the law's. I placed a worn leather journal on the table. The air went cold. Lauren knew what it was. Her smirk vanished, replaced by a sudden, chilling panic. This wasn't just my paperwork, it was the proof for complicity in Ethan's double life. This was the precise moment I realized I held absolute, unquestionable power. Their insults and demands had paved the way for their own destruction. They underestimated my ability to grieve and strategize. I had the legal facts to win the house, and now I had the devastating narrative to destroy their credibility. My resolve hardened, recognizing that my strength came not from forgiveness, but from unearthing the complete, ugly truth and presenting it with surgical precision. My composure was my weapon, the silence was my anticipation, and the journal was the bullet. The next move would decide everything, not just who got the house, but who controlled the narrative of Ethan's life. I looked at Lauren and David, held the journal, and smiled faintly. I was ready to speak the truth Ethan took. What shocking confession did the journal contain? And what was the ultimate truth about the money Lauren loaned my husband? Lauren wasn't just after the money, she wanted to shred my dignity. She leaned across the table, her voice dripping with venom, and delivered the ultimate insult. Victoria, you painted yourself as the perfect, loving wife, but you were just a disappointment. Ethan had to come to me, his sister, for comfort and financial help because you were so preoccupied with your own little world. He couldn't even talk to you about his stress. You failed him as a partner. I desperately searched my father's face, David, hoping for a flicker of paternal protection. He had always been stern, but never cruel. But today, he just looked away. His silence was the loudest betrayal in the room. His abandonment confirmed everything. They were a unified front, sacrificing my reputation and my stability for a chance at a larger inheritance. The years of quiet service, the loyalty, the grief, all dismissed with a single, averted gaze. I clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms. Rage, pure and white-hot, trembled beneath the surface of my grief. This wasn't mourning. This was being burned alive in the public arena they created. I had to choose my moment. Every cruel word, every false accusation was a debt I was recording. They believed their lies had won the day. They didn't realize they had simply given me permission to unleash a truth so destructive it would cost them far more than the house. They had asked for a war. The sting of the humiliation fueled my resolve, transforming me from the grieving widow to the calculated survivor. I was no longer fighting the dead, I was fighting the living, and they were far more vicious. I let the false narrative hang in the air for a moment, letting their arrogance solidify their mistake. They were celebrating their premature victory, watching for my tears, but I was done crying. My composure was the final insult they didn't see coming. My focus narrowed to the journal on the table. I was ready to hand them the legal documentation, that would instantly dismantle their claims, followed by the emotional truth bomb that would shatter their family forever. Did my evidence actually prove Lauren was the architect of this entire deception? Lauren's torrent of insults had stopped. The air hung thick with their expectation of my collapse. I met their gaze, not with tears, but with a cold, hard clarity. My moment had arrived. I placed the genuine, legally binding document onto the table, sliding it towards the notary. "Lauren, David, we are not discussing your demands. We are discussing the legal reality of Ethan's final will." Lauren reached for it, her face twisting into a sneer, dismissing it as more of your trickery. The notary, professional and immune to melodrama, gently placed a hand on the document and began to read the key clauses aloud. The reading confirmed my sole right to the entire marital estate, the house, the accounts, and the full life insurance policy. Lauren's unofficial, implied claim, the one based on deception, was legally nullified in a matter of seconds. The notary's calm recitation of the law was the sweetest music I had ever heard. Lauren went silent, her face paling. The smugness evaporated, replaced by the sheer terror of losing everything she'd schemed for. I had claimed my right, not through emotional pleading, but through Ethan's own legal declaration of loyalty. My independence was not a gift, it was a right, legally asserted and finalized. I leaned forward, my voice barely a whisper, but cutting through the tension. "This house is mine. These assets are mine. Liam's future is secured. You will not profit from your malice, Lauren." I was no longer the grieving widow fighting for scraps. I was the legal heir poised to deliver the final blow. But the house was just the battleground. The real war, the one for the truth, was about to begin. I pointed to the worn leather journal. The legal argument was over, but the emotional annihilation was pending. My calm resolve was terrifying to them because they expected hysteria. They had underestimated my preparation, but they were about to realize they'd fatally underestimated Ethan's guilt and need for confession. The journal contained the final, crushing details of their affair and the true purpose of every financial transaction. I was ready to use his remorse as my shield and their shared secret as my sword. The silence in the room was absolute, a perfect canvas for the destruction I was about to unleash. What was Ethan's final, heartbreaking message to me, and how did his own words prove Lauren's so-called loans were actually blackmail payments? The legal battle was over, but the emotional war had just begun. I held Ethan's worn leather journal, the final testament to his guilt and regret. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy with the weight of unsaid secrets. I opened it to the last entry, dated 2 days before his death. Ethan's handwriting, usually meticulous, was frantic. "I have to confess the truth to Victoria. Liam is not my biological son. He's my brother Daniel's." I let that lie in the air for a moment. Liam wasn't Ethan's son, but his nephew. My husband and his deceased brother had shared a secret that destroyed my faith, but it didn't end there. I turned the page, meeting Lauren's terrified eyes. And as for Lauren's loan, I read the chilling follow-up. Lauren discovered the truth last year. She threatened to expose the secret to Victoria, unless I paid her silence. That money was not a loan for the wedding. It was a series of blackmail payments to protect Daniel's secret and spare Victoria the pain. David stared at Lauren, his face shifting from complicity to utter, crushing realization. His beloved daughter wasn't just greedy, she was a blackmailer who had tormented her own dying brother for money. I closed the journal slowly, the sound echoing in the silence. "So, Lauren, you weren't an innocent sister seeking justice. You were a criminal attempting to profit twice, once through blackmail, and now through fraud. The house isn't the issue, your criminal actions are. The legal claim is dead. The moral claim is destroyed. Liam's true paternity is between me and Daniel's memory. But the blackmail payments are a matter for the police. My revenge was complete. I won the house, and I exposed their moral rot." I stood up, gathering my documents and my dignity. The devastation on their faces was the price of their cruelty, a debt they finally had to pay. I walked out, leaving the pieces of their shattered lives and Ethan's confession behind me. The pain of the past was now the power of my future. The final word belonged to the truth, and the truth was mine to wield. But did Lauren and David face the consequences of their blackmail, and how did I manage to tell Liam the truth about his father? Lauren's panicked shrieks and David's defeated silence faded. I was numb to their chaos. All that mattered was the final page of Ethan's journal, the one I hadn't fully read. Ethan's final entry was not about guilt, but love. My deepest regret is the secret, Victoria, but my greatest truth is you. Liam may not be my son by blood, but he is my son by every beat of my heart. He explained the will and the life insurance. I secured everything for you, not because of debt to Daniel, but because I knew my death would expose the lies. I needed a legal fortress to protect you and Liam from Lauren's avarice and David's silence. In that moment, the humiliation of the affair faded, replaced by the painful clarity of his devotion. He hadn't just confessed his sins, he had confessed his ultimate faith in me. I felt truly valued for the first time since his death, a complex mix of sorrow for his loss and gratitude for his final act of protection. My pain was validated, my worth acknowledged not by their cruelty, but by his desperate, final honesty. I looked up at Lauren, still frozen in horror, and David, whose head was in his hands. I didn't need to say another word to them. Ethan's love, in his final, flawed attempt, had protected me. Their malice was now meaningless, their attempt to redefine me as a gold digger utterly destroyed by the written truth. The family betrayal had been a devastating wound, but Ethan's final words were the unexpected and profound stitch. I rose from the table, leaving them to face the police and the notary with their shame and the irreversible ruin of their reputation. My journey through grief and betrayal had led me not to despair, but to fierce independence. I was now financially secure and emotionally validated, no longer the weeping widow, but the triumphant survivor. The only thing left was the future, a future built not on Ethan's secrets, but on my strength and Liam's security. The truth had set me free from both the marriage's deceit and the family's malice. How did I navigate the legal consequences for Lauren, and what profound lesson did I learn about forgiveness and moving on from the family that shattered my world? I walked out of that office, leaving the notary to call the police on Lauren and the wreckage of my family behind me. I had won the house, secured Liam's future, and exacted my revenge. But as I sat in the car, alone, the triumph felt hollow. The rush of adrenaline faded, replaced by an overwhelming emptiness. This victory hadn't brought peace, it just confirmed the extent of the lie I'd lived. The journal lay next to me, a painful testament to a love that was simultaneously real and fatally compromised. Ethan had protected me, yes, but only after a decade of complex, unnecessary deception. I had spent 12 years as the perfect wife, only to discover the foundation of my life was built on 3 interlocking secrets: my husband's affair, my son's paternity, and my sister's blackmail. I had fought to save my future, but I couldn't save my past. The revenge was sweet, certainly, watching Lauren's smug confidence dissolve into fear. But the aftertaste was bitter. The success was mixed with emptiness because the only person who could truly apologize was gone, leaving only his complicated guilt and my profound sense of loss. The revenge had been a necessary fire, but the ashes were all that remained of my marriage. I was financially independent and legally victorious, but emotionally adrift. The weight of being the sole keeper of all these devastating truths, Ethan's, Daniel's, and Lauren's, felt crushing. Revenge had given me a brief, powerful high, but healing would require something much harder, letting go of the need for perfect closure. The house was safe, but the home was broken. My path forward was clear, yet incredibly lonely. I was finally free from their control, but the quiet was deafening, forcing me to confront the wreckage alone. The battle was over, but the recovery was just beginning, and that was the truest, hardest challenge of all. How do you rebuild a life when the entire foundation was a beautiful, devastating lie? And what truth would Mai tell her son about the man he knew as his father? I reopened the journal, not to read a final loving message, but to expose the rot they tried to bury. I turned to the entry detailing the blackmail. Ethan wrote, "Lauren's greed is boundless. She knows I'm already sick. The doctors gave me a few months. She is draining my savings, leveraging Daniel's secret before I can set things right with Victoria. Lauren didn't just want the money. She knew her brother was terminally ill and used that vulnerability to extract every penny. Her attempts to seize the house were the final, greedy push against a dying man's final will. Then came the most agonizing detail. I told David about the blackmail, begging him to make Lauren stop. He told me to handle it discreetly so the scandal wouldn't hurt his reputation or his business. He chose his ego over my peace. I looked at David, my father. You knew your daughter was extorting your dying son, and your only concern was the scandal. You let this happen? His shame was a visible, physical collapse. His prestige was ruined, not by the will, but by his own cowardice. The truth of Lauren's alleged wedding loan was now undeniable. That money was Ethan's desperate payment for silence, extorted while he faced his own mortality. It was the financial proof of her criminal intent. I slammed the journal shut. You wanted to paint me as the gold digger who caused his stress. But you were the parasite who hastened his end, leeching off his fear of shame. My voice was loud, clean, and entirely free of grief for them. I handed the entire file, including the journal and bank records, to the notary. I have what Ethan intended, legal protection. Now, I ask you to contact the proper authorities. This is no longer a probate matter. It is a criminal investigation. I walked past David, offering nothing but silence. He was a broken man, defeated by his own greed and cowardice. Lauren tried to scream, but the notary was already on the phone. Their ruin was sealed by their own hands. The cruel truth was out. The family secrets were laid bare. My husband was a liar, but his final act was one of desperate, profound love. My family were criminals, exposed by their own vile actions. I had won the war, not for money, but for my right to define the future on my own terms. The pain was real, but the clarity was everything. I left them to their fate. I walked out of that office, leaving the notary to call the police on Lauren and the wreckage of my family behind me. I had won the house, secured Liam's future, and exacted my revenge. But as I sat in the car, alone, the triumph felt hollow. The rush of adrenaline faded, replaced by an overwhelming emptiness. This victory hadn't brought peace, it just confirmed the extent of the lie I'd lived. The journal lay next to me, a painful testament to a love that was simultaneously real and fatally compromised. Ethan had protected me, yes, but only after a decade of complex, unnecessary deception. I had spent 12 years as the perfect wife, only to discover the foundation of my life was built on 3 interlocking secrets: my husband's affair, my son's paternity, and my sister's blackmail. I had fought to save my future, but I couldn't save my past. The revenge was sweet, certainly, watching Lauren's smug confidence dissolve into fear. But the aftertaste was bitter. The success was mixed with emptiness because the only person who could truly apologize was gone. I was financially independent and legally victorious, but emotionally adrift. The weight of being the sole keeper of all these devastating truths, Ethan's, Daniel's, and Lauren's, felt crushing. Revenge had given me a brief, powerful high, but healing would require something much harder, letting go of the need for perfect closure. The house was safe, but the home was broken. My path forward was clear, yet incredibly lonely. The cruelest truth was the reality of Ethan's illness and his family's willingness to exploit it. But what were the final legal consequences for Lauren and David's blackmail scheme? And how did I finally explain the complicated truth about his father to my son Liam? The immediate aftermath of the notarization was not celebration but exhaustion. I'd won the war, but I was emotionally shattered. My priority shifted entirely, protecting Liam from the fallout and the cruel whispers. I began to clean the house with a desperate intensity. Every item connected to Ethan's secrets, every picture that felt like a lie, had to go. I was creating a sanctuary for Liam, a space free from the toxicity of the past. Watching Liam play quietly in the garden, oblivious to the storm that had passed, was my only therapy. I realized the true value of the house wasn't its monetary worth, but the safe harbor it represented for my son. Lauren was facing the legal consequences of her blackmail, a process that was swift and brutal. David's business reputation was ruined by his recorded complicity. The revenge was served, but it brought no joy, only a profound sense of finality. The emotional debris was finally being swept away. The house was clean, the secrets were buried from the outside world, and the necessity of stability was my driving force. But one terrifying task remained: the truth about Liam's paternity. How do you tell a young boy that the father he mourns wasn't his father at all, and what words would choose to protect his innocent heart? The house was quiet. The financial and legal battles were won, but the real crisis was only just beginning, playing out in the silence of Liam's room. I sat beside him, watching his peaceful 7-year-old face. Intense fear pulsed through me. How do you shatter a child's world without destroying his sense of self? I was the keeper of a terrible secret. The man he knew as his father was not his father by blood, but by choice, a choice laced with deceit. Maternal anxiety was a physical weight on my chest. Ethan's final journal entry echoed, "He is my son by every beat of my heart." That was the only truth that mattered. But how could I convey that love without exposing the crushing layers of lies, betrayal, and blackmail that came with it? I felt the profound tenderness for Liam, a love that demanded I protect him, even from the man he mourned. I wrestled with the ethical dilemma. To tell the whole truth was to expose the ugliness of my family and risk shattering his innocent trust in adults. I feared his rejection, not of me, but of the very idea of family. The whole family structure, on both sides, had dissolved into deceit and cruelty. I was terrified he would lose his trust in the world entirely. I knew I had to build the narrative not around Ethan's flaw, but around his final strength. I would tell him about Ethan's choice, the deliberate, unwavering choice to be his father every single day, and the choice to protect him in the end with the will. I began to craft the story carefully, removing Lauren's malice and David's cowardice. I stripped away the blackmail and focused only on the paternal love that compelled Ethan to secure our future against all odds. This was a form of self-censorship, a necessary maternal sacrifice to ensure my son's emotional safety. The legal victory felt insignificant compared to this emotional surgery. I read Ethan's final words, drawing courage from his genuine remorse and protective actions. He had spent his last months ensuring our security, a profound act of love that overshadowed the years of complex deception. My strategic resolve hardened. I would emphasize the depth of the chosen love, a love more powerful than blood, while minimizing the painful details of Daniel's role. Tomorrow, I would risk everything for his emotional well-being. The finalized anxiety was almost unbearable, but my duty was clear: shield my son. The truth was a weapon that had freed me from my in-laws, but for my son, it had to be a shield. I hoped that the love Ethan showed him would be enough to absorb the shock of the truth, allowing him to hold on to the memory of a loving father, even if the label was different. I kissed his forehead, drawing a quiet strength from his innocent breathing. I was ready to face the hardest conversation of my life, the final step in my journey from a betrayed wife to a fiercely independent mother. I knew the words had to be perfect, gentle, yet unwavering. The truth, simplified, must set him free too. I prayed that my love, coupled with Ethan's final dedication, would be enough to mend his heart. The quiet crisis had reached its peak. What was Liam's reaction to the revelation? And would I finally find peace after sharing the last painful secret? The day after the revelation to Liam felt different. The house was calm, secured by law and love. But the calm was not peace. It was the solemn silence that follows an explosion. I had won everything, yet I felt utterly alone. I realized then the true cost of my victory. There would be no reconciliation. David made no attempt to apologize. Lauren's only message was bitterness from jail. I tried to grasp the idea of forgiveness, but it felt like a betrayal of my own pain. How do you forgive the person who weaponized your dead husband's secret and profited from his death? The answer was simple and harsh: you don't. My healing wouldn't come from their apology or my false grace. It would come from acceptance. I had to accept Ethan's lie, accept Daniel's ghost, and accept that the family I married into was toxic. Liam was my future. He had accepted the complicated truth with the wisdom that astonished me. Ethan chose to be my dad, Mom. That's all that matters. His simple faith was my final lesson, reinforcing the power of chosen love over biological ties. I stood up, feeling a new kind of strength. It wasn't the volatile heat of revenge, but the cold, steady power of self-ownership. I owned the house, the narrative, and my future. I never spoke to David or Lauren again. They were left to manage the wreckage of their lives and reputations. My revenge was ultimately a byproduct of my survival. I realized that the greatest victory wasn't destroying them, but building a new life free of them. I achieved fierce independence, not by finding someone new, but by trusting myself completely. The acceptance of the harsh truth was the final and most essential step in my recovery. The house felt less like a monument to a lie and more like a testament to my resilience. My story wasn't just a revenge tale, it was a survival guide. What advice would you give to someone trying to rebuild their life after a family betrayal this severe? The police reports were filed. Lauren was gone. David was silent. I thought the drama was over, but the toxic family always makes one last desperate attempt to claw their way back into your life. It was a text from David, a manipulative plea for family unity, now that Lauren was detained. He tried to frame me as the aggressor who tore the family apart, not his own choices. In the past, I would have debated, justified, or felt guilty. But that woman was gone. I simply deleted the text without a reply, then blocked his number forever. This was the final, definitive act of standing up for myself. The action of hitting block felt more powerful than any shouting match, a declaration of absolute finality. The police reports were filed. Lauren was gone. David was silent. I thought the drama was over, but the toxic family always makes one last desperate attempt to claw their way back into your life. It was a text from David, a manipulative plea for family unity, now that Lauren was detained. He tried to frame me as the aggressor who tore the family apart, not his own choices. In the past, I would have debated, justified, or felt guilty. But that woman was gone. I simply deleted the text without a reply, then blocked his number forever. This was the final, definitive act of standing up for myself. The action of hitting block felt more powerful than any shouting match, a declaration of absolute finality. My next action was symbolic. I hired a locksmith to change every lock in the house, a physical barrier against past intruders. Then, a gate service installed a simple, elegant fence and a new entry system. The house was no longer the house of the disputed estate. It was my home, secured by my resilience and the law. I had seized self-sovereignty over my life and my space. No more emotional invasions. The physical security of the property mirrored the unwavering resolve I had finally built inside. My journey began with quiet grief and spiraled into open warfare. But the end was not destruction, it was construction. I built a life that was authentic, free from the obligation of performing as the perfect wife for a deceitful family. I learned that standing up for yourself isn't always a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes, it's the quiet power of hitting block. It's realizing your peace is more valuable than their need for manipulation. It's choosing your own reality, recognizing that their opinions no longer hold sway. I never spoke to David or Lauren again. They were left to manage the wreckage of their lives and reputations, and I accepted that their ruin was not my responsibility. It was the consequence of their own vile actions. My revenge was ultimately a byproduct of my survival. I realized that the greatest victory wasn't destroying them, but building a new life free of them. I achieved fierce independence, not by finding someone new, but by trusting myself completely. The ultimate demonstration of my self-sovereignty was recognizing that I didn't owe them even a final angry word. The silence was my power. The house felt less like a monument to a lie and more like a testament to my resilience. My story wasn't just a revenge tale, it was a survival guide. What do you believe is the single most important action I took to secure happiness after the truth came out? I thought I was free. I had blocked their numbers, changed the locks, and secured my peace. But toxic families rarely exit quietly. A few weeks later, an email slipped through, sent by David's lawyer, a final poisoned dart aimed directly at the heart of my sanity. The subject line screamed, "A plea for reason and family." The body was a lengthy, self-pitying tirade. David's words, filtered through a lawyer, still dripped with false authority in a desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative. He began by minimizing Lauren's actions, calling the blackmail a misguided attempt to protect the family's honor. He then pivoted to the ultimate act of psychological warfare, blaming the victim. He blamed me for not being supportive enough of Ethan, suggesting my lack of wifely devotion pushed him to dishonesty and secrecy regarding Liam's paternity. The audacity was breathtaking. They had criminalized themselves, ruined their own lives, and still, I was the underlying cause of the entire catastrophe. David suggested that if I hadn't been so focused on money, their pathetic, persistent narrative, Ethan wouldn't have felt compelled to hide Liam's paternity to secure my financial future, and would have never been vulnerable to Lauren's schemes. He claimed my pursuit of justice was nothing more than vindictive cruelty, an unnecessary, destructive act that severed the innocent connection between Liam and his grandfather. He concluded by insisting that for the sake of family, I must drop the charges against Lauren and allow David back into Liam's life. This was the final test. I could either engage with the venom and let it drag me back into the toxicity, or stand firmly in my truth and refuse the burden of their blame. I chose to answer, not for them, they were incapable of comprehension, but for the satisfaction of laying my unflinching self-accountability bare, while entirely rejecting their manipulative lies. This was the final step in my healing, owning my errors without accepting their criminality. My reply was short, clean, and devastatingly precise. I began by meeting their manipulation with truth. David, I accept my responsibility. I was a fool for believing your son, and I was naive for trusting your daughter. That is my fault. I take full accountability for my choice to live in ignorance. This opening was essential. It showed I was past denial. Then came the crucial rebuttal, delivered with righteous judgment. However, my naivety did not compel your daughter to commit blackmail against her dying brother, nor did it force you to abandon your son in his last months to protect your corporate prestige. Their actions and your willful silence and complicity are solely your responsibility. You are not a victim of my justice, you are the architect of your own ruin. I meticulously dismantled his narrative, item by item. I pointed out that his concern for family honor only appeared when his wallet and reputation were threatened. I reminded him that I only sought the truth, and their own actions confirmed its cruelest details. I stated that my victory was not vindictive, It was simply the rule of law enforcing the will of a man who desperately tried to protect his chosen family from his toxic birth family. I typed the final, crushing word, my finger hovering over the send button, feeling the rush of final release. The chapter is closed. Do not contact me or Liam again. You are no longer family, and your false narrative holds no power here. I have replaced your toxicity with the profound peace of truth and self-sovereignty. The only thing you can do for us now is disappear. Goodbye. I hit send. The screen flashed, confirming the delivery of my final declaration of independence. There was no reply, only the silence that followed the definitive end of a relationship. I had not just won the house, I had won my life back, defined it on my own terms, and completely rejected the toxic burden of their blame. The fear was gone, replaced by the unshakable realization that their misery was their own choice, and my happiness was mine. Was this final, decisive rejection enough to truly close the door on the ghosts of my past, or would I find that some scars run too deep to fully heal? The air was finally clean after I sent that final email. The door was shut on the past. But true healing isn't just about silence, it's about finding voices that affirm your truth. My old friend Mara had been with me through every agonizing stage. I told her about David's final, blame-shifting letter. Her response was simple and immediate. You did everything right, V. You protected your son. Their shame is not your fault. Hearing that from someone who loved me, who was chosen family, mattered more than 1,000 apologies from David. It was the final permission I needed to let go of the lingering guilt that Ethan's secrets were somehow my burden. The warm validation I received from Mara was the antidote to the years of silent manipulation. I spoke to Mara about Liam's beautiful acceptance. The way he distilled the complicated lie down to a simple truth. Ethan chose me. He's resilient, Mara, I said. He doesn't need a biological father, he just needs an honest, loving mother. His resilience was the ultimate proof that my revenge, my quest for justice and security had worked. Mara's final words were the last nail in the coffin of the past. V, they don't get to hurt you anymore. They are out of your life, legally and emotionally. Your revenge worked because you sought justice, not destruction. You owe them nothing. This ethical validation solidified my decision to maintain absolute distance. I hung up the phone and looked around my home. The silence was different now, it was full. Full of my voice, Liam's laughter, and the unspoken affirmation of my chosen friends. I finally understood what truly mattered. My growth was profound. I realized that the core of the found family I had built, Mara, Liam, and the memory of Ethan's protective love, was strong enough to withstand any biological or legal storm. The hollow victory I first felt was now transformed into sublime peace. My story is not just about a will, a lie, or revenge. It's about the fierce power of self-determination, the refusal to let someone else's secrets define your worth. The hardest part wasn't fighting them, it was fighting the part of me that still needed their approval. I finally shed the self-blame that toxic people rely on to control you. The process was brutal, but the resulting independence was absolute. Life didn't snap back to normal, it gently unfolded into something better. The shadows of betrayal were replaced by the simple, undeniable light of a new morning, and a future entirely our own. We found joy in small, routine moments, Liam's laughter echoing in the now safe garden, quiet movie nights, and the absence of any looming, toxic threat. The feeling was not exhilaration, but quiet joy, a deep, sustainable contentment that comes from knowing you are truly free. With the house and finances secured, I found a renewed purpose. I used my organizational skills, sharpened by years of managing a complicated lie, and then executing a complex revenge, to launch a consultancy helping other women navigate probate disputes and family estrangement. It was incredibly healing. I wasn't just working, I was leveraging my painful experience to be a shield for others. I could tell them, "You are not the gold digger, you are the survivor. Take control of your narrative. Your worth is not determined by their will." I felt an immense satisfaction from transforming my trauma into a source of empowerment for others. This career, built on brutal honesty, was the perfect antidote to the deceit of my former life. Liam and I established our new truth. We celebrated Ethan's love, the deliberate, unwavering choice he made to be his father, while gently acknowledging the complexities of the past. We spoke about Ethan's final bravery, focusing on his act of protection rather than his years of secrecy. The absence of the toxic family, the endless judgmental phone calls, the manipulative holidays was a gift of unshakable peace for him. He was thriving, feeling secure and unconditionally loved. "He's resilient, Mara," I had said. "He doesn't need a biological father, he just needs an honest, loving mother." His resilience was my ultimate validation. I began to see the house differently. No longer the battleground of Ethan's guilt, but the solid foundation he had died protecting. It was a testament to his final, flawed attempt at redemption, and my fierce resilience. I renovated the home, stripping away the ostentatious details the family had insisted upon, replacing them with simple, clean lines that reflected my new, authentic freedom. I felt a powerful connection to the property, not as a legacy, but as a space I had fought for and won. This house was a symbol of my self-sovereignty. David's prestigious career evaporated, Lauren served her time. Their ruin was complete, but my happiness was no longer contingent on their suffering. I had achieved genuine emotional detachment. I could read their names in old news articles with nothing but true indifference. They simply ceased to matter. The revenge was necessary to sever the connection, but the subsequent indifference was the true mark of my healing. I understood that carrying hatred would only keep their toxicity alive in my heart, and I chose to replace it with peace. As the months passed, the memory of the betrayal faded from the forefront, becoming a harsh, valuable lesson. I realized that the greatest treasure Ethan left me wasn't the house or the money. It was the cruel clarity that forced me to define my life on my own terms. I learned the most important love is self-love, and the most important family is the one you actively choose to build. I also learned that the most dangerous lie is the one you tell yourself to maintain a false peace. My new life was built on truth, no matter how harsh. I embraced a philosophical peace and understanding that life is imperfect, but my response to it can be perfect in its honesty and strength. My journey from a betrayed wife to a self-made woman was a total transformation. I wasn't just surviving, I was flourishing. I had rebuilt my emotional framework, replacing the shaky foundation of deceit with the bedrock of self-respect. The final, powerful takeaway was that sometimes, the family who breaks you gives you the unexpected gift of finding the strength to rebuild completely on your own. I am my own hero. So my friends, that's my survival guide. It began with betrayal, fueled by revenge, and ended with a life more honest and fulfilling than the one I lost. The core family toxicity was gone, but the old ties remained: the mutual friends, the colleagues who always sided with David's money, the social circles built on Ethan's pretense. I scrolled through my phone contacts, seeing names that represented years of shared dinners, forced smiles, and polite deception. These people were the ecosystem of the lie. Their relevance had evaporated the moment I chose honesty. Most of them vanished, preferring silence over confronting the truth. But some tried to play the neutral role, sending vague, pitying messages, comments like, "It's so sad for the family," or "I hope you two can reconcile for the sake of the holidays." They wanted to maintain their social standing without getting dirtied by my scandal, desperately hoping I'd resume the facade of the perfect wife so their comfortable world wouldn't be disturbed. Their hypocrisy was a final, sickening dose of the old life. My unsentimental clarity was absolute. I realized these people were never friends of Victoria, they were accessories to the perfect wife pretense. They were loyal to the status quo, not to truth or genuine affection. I didn't owe them explanation, grief, or loyalty. I felt a surge of cold disdain and proceeded to delete or block every name that represented conditional friendship. This was an act of profound self-respect and assertive self-protection. I was actively curating my future, eliminating every potential weak link that could allow the past to seep back in. I had spent years valuing loyalty to Ethan's circle, thinking it mattered to my identity. Now I understood that true loyalty is to your own peace and the well-being of your child. Cutting these ties wasn't revenge. It was an act of radical self-respect. It was recognizing that my newfound independence was too precious to compromise for the sake of maintaining a false social network. The difference between them and Mara was glaring. Mara asked for the truth and offered unconditional support. The others demanded silence and offered conditional pity. I chose my found family over the biological and social accessories that came with the marriage. The only truly complex remaining tie was Daniel's ghost, Liam's biological father. I revisited the final entry in Ethan's journal, the one detailing Daniel's distance and Ethan's own protective intentions. I made the conscious decision to keep that truth contained, not out of shame, but out of calculated protection. Daniel was a footnote in the past, a brief, unfortunate mistake in Ethan's history, not a presence in Liam's future. Liam had accepted his father's chosen love, and introducing a man who had zero interest in being a parent, simply because of biology, would be cruel and unnecessary. I sealed the journal, the DNA test, and all associated evidence in a safe deposit box, ensuring that Liam would inherit the truth only when he was ready to handle it when he asked. I surveyed the house, its new locks, its quiet grounds. Every physical boundary I put in place was a reflection of the emotional walls I had built around Liam and myself. The boundaries were unbreakable, protecting our absolute security. The house stood as a fortress of peace, defended by my unwavering confidence and the rule of law. The revenge was complete, the healing was profound, and the boundaries were permanent. My life, once defined by the secrets of others, was now defined by my own fierce choices. I was living my new life, not just enduring it. Liam was flying a kite, a simple act of freedom that mirrored my own spirit. I had reached a place of serene confidence, where I didn't need the past to justify my present or the approval of others to define my worth. The financial security was stable, the emotional boundaries were unbreakable, and the toxic noise had completely faded. This silence was my new reality, and I embraced it with quiet optimism. I wasn't looking for romance. I was looking for a new brand of authenticity in all my interactions. I had learned the hard way that a facade, however beautiful, is fundamentally unstable. But sometimes, when you stop searching for what you think you need, the universe gently places something real in your path. It happened on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. A friendly face approached a man, Jake, walking his dog. Liam's kite line had tangled, a frustrating mess that used to be a metaphor for my entire life. Jake didn't rush or make a fuss, he just knelt down, patiently untangling the string, sharing a quiet, honest moment with my son. He treated Liam with the kind of genuine, unhurried attention that had been entirely absent from the transactional world of Ethan's family. The difference was stark. It was a tiny moment, but it struck me. There was no pretense, no performance. Just a simple, good deed rooted in empathy. This was the kind of uncomplicated honesty that I had fought so hard to reclaim. I watched him, observing the lack of the aggressive ambition that defined the men in my past. Jake stood up, wiping his hands. Looks like he's ready to soar now. They always get tangled just before they hit the real altitude. He smiled at me, a genuinely warm, unburdened smile. I didn't feel the sudden, intoxicating rush of romance. I felt something deeper, recognition. He recognized the simple humanity I had fought so hard to reclaim. I was ready for this kind of connection, slow, honest, and grounded. My internal reaction was not to recoil in fear of betrayal, but to meet his gaze with readiness, and my own, newly authentic smile. The thought of engaging with someone new didn't bring anxiety, it brought a sense of gentle hope for the unwritten future. The past was a brutal, necessary lesson, but it was no longer a predictor of my future. We exchanged a few brief, uncomplicated sentences about the weather and the park. There was no desperate exchange of numbers, just a mutual, easy acknowledgement of existence. He was a turning point, not a destination. He was a symbol that my healing was complete. I was strong enough to face the world and trust genuine connection again. I had built a life so strong that no one could accidentally or intentionally dismantle it. My identity was now self-derived, not reflected by a husband or a social circle. I realized that my greatest victory wasn't the house or the money, but the ability to stand in the light and accept a simple kindness without fear. I was no longer the cautious, quiet woman defined by her husband's secrets, but a woman defined by her fierce resilience and her choice of peace. My empowering conclusion was that the journey of revenge ultimately led to the most profound form of self-love. I had moved from being a victim of deceit to being the author of my own destiny. My life, with all its scars, was ready for a clean slate. So, this is where my story lands. It began with the shock of a betrayal that reached beyond the grave and ended with the quiet realization that my worth was never tied to their approval or their money. The whole terrifying experience was a brutal awakening. My revenge wasn't a satisfying Hollywood explosion. It was a methodical act of self-preservation. I used their own darkness, their greed and manipulation as the fuel to secure my son's future and my own peace. I learned that the process of justice is often cold, but the resulting peace is intensely warm. The biggest lie I shed was the belief that blood equals family. It doesn't. Family is defined by unconditional chosen love and honesty. Liam's father was the man who chose him, and my family is the small, honest circle who stood by me. This final honesty was the greatest gift I gave myself. If you are trapped in someone else's toxic narrative, remember this: the only person who gets to write your ending is you. Do not let their guilt or their lies define the worth of your pain. Your strength lies in your self-determination. My journey taught me that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to become the villain in someone else's story, or, more accurately, to become the hero in your own. My ultimate victory wasn't financial. It was the empowered closure I found in absolute independence. My revenge story is over, but your journey of self-determination might just be beginning. I didn't share all this just for shock value. I shared it because I learned 5 crucial lessons I hope you never forget. I transformed from a victim of deceit into the architect of my own life, and you can, too. First, remember lesson 1. Truth is your shield. Don't let shame keep you silent. The truth is your weapon, and it gives you the legal and moral high ground against manipulators. Silence is their power. Break it. Next is lesson 2. Revenge must serve justice. If your goal is only destruction, you destroy yourself too. My revenge was a methodical effort to seek justice and secure a future. Make your actions productive, not just punitive. Then there's lesson 3. Chosen family is everything. Blood is not loyalty. Invest your time and heart into the people who choose you and affirm your worth, like my friend Mara. Cut the toxic ties without guilt or hesitation. The warmth of a chosen family is stronger than any biological bond. My 4th takeaway is that lesson 4, boundaries are unbreakable. Once you establish a boundary, defend it fiercely. Blocking David's final manipulative plea was an act of self-sovereignty more powerful than any legal ruling. Do not engage the venom, simply secure your borders. And finally, lesson 5, define your own ending. They wanted me miserable, financially ruined, and perpetually guilty. Instead, I rebuilt my life on my terms, starting a career where I help others find their voice. Your greatest victory is not their ruin, but your own unshakable happiness. That is the true, lasting revenge. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 5 lessons resonates most deeply with your own life? Share your thoughts and stories of survival in the comments below. Let's build a community where we celebrate self-determination and truth over toxicity and lies.